The following is a KPB MediaWorks production.
Choose your fighter.
Welcome to another episode of KPBCast, guys. With me today, we have Retrostation for talking a little bit of a fun subject that I've always wanted to explore within this community. Retro, thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you for having me. How are you?
Yeah, and I'm doing pretty good, man. And like you said earlier, this is Ronnie's fault. This is why he hasn't been on the show until now. Blame Ronnie, not me.
Finally, my time has come.
Before we go on, guys, remember the podcast is available at iHeartRadio, Apple Podcasts, Spotify Podcasts, Google Podcasts. Video goodness will be coming to you through Twitch TV, and then it's going to follow up on YouTube. But anyway, let's get this going. Something I've always wanted to talk about with the community, well, in the gaming community in general, but obviously we're FGC. It's Japanese culture, how much of a hold it has on a lot of people within the community. Again, on the gaming community, but we're just going to stick to our little corner. And again, I had talked to Mike. I had asked Mike who would have been the perfect person to do this, and your name came up, and I'm glad you came. You're able to sit down with us, and we're going to talk about this subject. But from your recollection, you've been doing gaming for quite a while, correct?
Yeah, I've been doing gaming about 90% of my life. I started gaming when I was like 5 or 6 years old.
5 or 6 years old. But you know what? Before we get into the subject, I mean, what is the earliest? What is 6 years old? Basically, your earliest gaming recollection?
Yes.
And what was that? What does that consist of? Was it like playing consoles with your brothers, sisters, family members, arcades?
Yep. Was mostly playing consoles with my brothers and sisters. I did not explore the arcade side of things until I was in high school. My very first console was the Sega Genesis. I remember my mom had gotten the bundle with the Sega 6-pack, so it came with Sonic the Hedgehog, Streets of Rage, Columns, Golden Axe, Revenge of Shinobi, and Super Hang-On. A lot of games that are still near and dear to me almost 25 years later.
Sega Genesis. What was your favorite game out of all those games? Or what's your favorite genre?
My favorite genre, I am more of an action kind of guy. So character action games like Devil May Cry, anything like action RPG-ish, like Phantasy Star Online 2 or Terra or anything of that nature. But as long as I'm not sitting there just, taking turns with things like, RPGs, I can play a couple of turn-based RPGs, but as long as I'm actively involved in what my character can do, then that's my kind of thing.
What was your first ever experience with a competitive gaming scene? Whether it be FGC, whether it be speed running, you're into the kart scene as well. Well, again, what was that first experience?
My first dive into the competitive scene in general, I want to say it is FGC, but that wasn't until I was about 18 or 19. I used to play, I used to bring, my Mugen build to the library on 46 and Lex, hang out with my friends there, and we just freaking go, just swing at each other. But as far as like the hardcore competitive scene, as far as like FGC is concerned, my first big tournament was the New York qualifier for the Street Fighter 25th anniversary tournament series back in 2012.
What did you think of the scene when you first encountered it?
Y'all wild as hell. I up until I had joined the FGC proper, I had always been, on the casual competitive side, where I wasn't entering events, but I was taking playing my friends and other people like semi-seriously. So coming into Street Fighter 25th anniversary, K Brad's there, Justin Wong is there, a bunch of the big names are there. And then, I'm just doing whatever I can to survive. I ended up going one. Go ahead.
I'm sorry?
What were you going to say?
I said, you mentioned K Brad, Jay Wong. Were you aware that these were the big names in the scene before you decided to join this
Yes.
tournament? Oh, you were, okay.
Yeah, I was aware. I was aware of the big names. I was familiar with a handful of the big names on, especially like around the country in the East Coast. Especially considering that I was an old Chinatown Fair regular.
Old
So I was
Chinatown Fair
around.
regular. What games did you mainly play in there?
I mainly played Dance Dance Revolution Extreme and in the group too. I was big into rhythm gaming in my late teens and early 20s.
In this show, and you're well aware of this, we talk a lot about Chinatown Fair. And were you there before it closed down and it turned into that family fun center that it became?
Yes, I was there. I had been around since 2006. I was part of the DDR club in high school, and we used to take occasional field trips down to Old Chinatown Fair. But after I graduated and I started, going to college, I would go every Friday whenever I could and play ITG. And it was actually there that I saw the Gambit glitch for MVC2 because I watched Chris G pull it off. He was just like, "Hey, here, come watch this." He does the glitch, walks away, and we're just sitting there dying laughing because it's just the dumbest thing ever.
I'm so glad you mentioned that about being inside the dancing game club. Take us through a little bit of that scene in Chinatown Fair, or that scene in general, because we obviously hear so much about the FGC, and it's like it was such a cramped little space inside Chinatown Fair, and the dancing machines had their space, the fighting games dominated the place, but talk to us about that scene. What was it like? Take us into it.
So the funny thing about that is that from my experience, back then the rhythm game community and the fighting game community had a bit of overlap. You had people that played a little bit of both, and the funny part is that the the dance machines were on one wall. So if you're walking down the passage towards the very back, on your right, it's all the rhythm game machines. So you had DDR Extreme, and then you had In the Groove to its left. And then directly behind them, across the passageway, you had all the fighting games lined up. So you had Marvel, you had CVS2, you had all that other stuff. And then at one point, you had that one funny boxing game, that one test your might thing where it's like, it drops down the punching bag and you just hit it as hard as you can.
We always talk about, and again, this is a topic, this is something we've talked about so many times with so many people in here. The cliquish feeling CTF had. Did the dancing community, were there cliques in there just like the FGC had cliques? Or what was your experience with that? Or did you just go about your day as, not paying it any attention?
I was kind of like the independent type. I mean, I had friends, like I was acquainted with people in both communities, but I could see the cliquish vibes in both circles. And it's not something that personally affected me because I was just, I was kind of like the social butterfly, surprisingly enough, where it's just like, I knew people, I was cool with people, but I wasn't too invested socially in most of the people there because, again, most of them are acquaintances. So it's just like I knew people enough where I could have conversation, but I wasn't invested enough where the clicky vibes got to me. Just like I'm there to play games, I'm there to chill. If I vibe with people, I vibe with people. If I don't, then it is what it is.
When old CTF shut down, were you so far removed from it, or were you still going there on a regular basis that you felt some sadness to it?
By the time old CF had closed down, I was actually in Virginia. Had a rough patch in my life personally. Had to move to Virginia to get my life together. But I found out after I had moved over there about CTF's closure, and it was a little saddening because we knew, like, they told us months in advance that it was eventually happening. So I was still in New York when they had made the announcement, but I was already out of town by the time that it actually closed. And then I found out, oh, hey, it's reopening. It's like, yay. And then I see the neon paint on the inside, and I'm just like, what the hell have you done with this place? And then when I came back to New York a year later, I, paid the place a visit just to see what it was like, and it literally looked like a great value Dave and Buster's. Yes, it was a Walmart store. It was a Walmart store brand Dave and Buster's.
That is true. You couldn't have put it any better. But in some of the documentaries we've talked about on this show, the dancing community was still there. Were you able to hook up with any of those people again, or do you just let it go? It's like, you know what, I'm moving on with my life.
I just let it go. Like I have met so many people in my travels, in my day to day, that trying to keep up with absolutely everybody that I meet would just be overwhelming and just not feasible at all. It's just that's how many people I've met. I've literally met hundreds, if not low key, at least over 1,000 people in the last 10 years alone. It's just I have a lot of circles. I mingle with a lot of people. Like, I have my fingers in many social pies, and a lot of it tends to have overlap too.
Okay.
So it's just like, I have people, in the comic friends, who like comic books. I have people who like fighting games. I have people who like rhythm games. I have people who like horror games. And then, I'm kind of like the link, I'm like the bridge to everything. But then I know people who also act as that bridge for multiple circles, to where I've actually, on several occasions, I've met people for the first time, and then they'll be hanging out with somebody that I know, and then I'll be like, "Hey, person," and then the new person's looking at me like, "How the fuck do you know this guy?" And then I regale them with tales of how I met that person.
It was like
I've
the
had that
Facebook
happen.
algorithm. It's like the Facebook algorithm. Hey,
Basically,
you might be mutual friends.
people you may know.
Well, you say you got your life back together. You paid the place a visit. Right afterwards, did you jump right into the offline FGC events like Big E stuff or even local stuff during the big boom?
So, believe it or not, I actually did not start traveling out to events until 2018. Winter Brawl 2018 was my very first event. I had taken part in online events, and I've taken part in stuff like Next Level. I had actually helped facilitate. I had actually facilitated Skullgirls locals back in 2014, back when Next Level was at their old locale on, I forget where it was. So I think it was off the N train.
Yes.
They weren't where they are now though. I think it was 8th Ave on the N train.
Yeah, it was off of the freeway or something like that, like in a
Yeah,
very very deep part of town in some place in Brooklyn. It
yeah,
was a pain.
right,
It was a
right,
pain
yeah.
in the ass to get to, though.
Yeah, it was in the deep end of Brooklyn. You had to take the N train to get there, like N train specifically. And back then, I was heavy into like supporting Skullgirls. I was heavy into like supporting the scene. Did a couple of exhibitions. I wasn't by any means a top player. I was intermediate at best, but I was one of those players that was crazy enough to take good players on. Like I was hungry at the time,
Is this
and
you mentioned something. You were an intermediate player, your own words. So you knew what you were getting yourself into. You knew the top
yes,
players and everything like that, and you were perfectly fine with that. Was there a
yeah.
point where you realized maybe I would rather do more organizing, more bracket running, helping behind the scenes, than actually try to continue on a competitive career?
Yes, actually. That came to me in 2019. Came to me in 2019. By then I was like, competing low key in Street Fighter 5, in Dragon Ball, not the best career record. It's just like on average, I broke even. If that. But my one driving force for Dragon Ball was my partner at the time. Her name was Gethsemane, and she has almost no gaming experience whatsoever. She'd watched Dragon Ball growing up. She watched me play. She was super interested, and she used to watch streams. She used to watch what's it the Majin Obama and Yuna streams at the Red Bull Gaming Sphere out in Tokyo. She used to watch that. She used to watch other streams. Like, she was so invested to the point where she was low key my coach. And because she would spot flaws in my game plan. She's like, hey, you gotta not do this, you gotta do this. And coming from someone who has no gaming experience, but who stood there and had the analytical prowess to pick apart common strategies and common follow-ups is like, I valued that. I treasured that. So when we ultimately broke up, I sat there and I thought about, if I wanted to continue competing, not because of not because of my failings, or not necessarily my failings, but my shortcomings as a player, but more or less as, and was I doing this? Was I sticking to competition for myself, or was I sticking to competition to make her happy? So while I tried figuring that out, I focused more on organizing and less competing. I took a competitive hiatus. Like I'd play casuals with people, but aside from that, like I wasn't like really entering anything.
Did you ever figure out why you did it?
Yeah, I figured out what I did, why I did it, and part of it was to make her happy, and part of it was because I enjoy the thrill of competition. The thing is that I tend to be very hard on myself, and that's just still something I'm working on. I come from a perfectionist backing where I was expected to be nothing less than the best, and when you're told, as a kid, you're young, when you're a kid and they tell you that you're gifted, you're talented, and they gas you up, and then they put all these expectations on you, it really fucks you up as you get older.
Once you get to
Because
the
then
real world?
yeah, once you get to the real world, and then you realize that nothing is as easy as other people made it.
Well, you decided to now become a organizer or help in the backgrounds, however you want to say it. You said for Skullgirls mainly, or anything that you're able to get your hands on. What's that leap like? A lot of people have done it in the community. A lot of people don't stick around because they realize, quite frankly, let's be honest, it's a thankless job.
You are not wrong.
I mean, you take us through that. What's it like deciding I'm going to put the stick down and this is what I want to concentrate on? I want to make the community better. Like, what are some hurdles and what are some of the things that make you proud about doing that?
So 2014 was when I got to facilitate getting Skullgirls local into next level. I talked to Dino, I talked to Team Stickbug, and I got the ball rolling because back then I was very passionate about Skullgirls. I was very passionate about the community. I loved a lot of the people there. I still talk to a couple of the people there, and that was 2014 was just a taste of what an organizer was like. I didn't dive headfirst into organizing until I started traveling to events. Like when I went to 2018, my very first major, Winter Brawl, um, a lot of Biggie's volunteers just up and disappeared, and he was very short-handed. And I was like, you know what? I'm only competing in a couple of things. I think I was competing in like Street Fighter 5, maybe, I forget. But I knew I was there to have a good time. And if having a good time meant, helping out the event, then I was like, all right, you know what? Fuck it. I'm gonna run around. I am not the kind of person that enjoys sitting still. I like being stimulated, I like being occupied. And if and walking around, updating brackets, making sure that everybody's in and out in a certain time, that's what does it for me. Like, y'all give us 2-hour blocks. I have my blocks done in like an hour and change at most. I am
That's
very
cool.
I am very efficient when it comes to running my brackets, and I'm very no nonsense when it comes to punctuality. I will not hesitate to DQ someone if you are late, if you have not communicated with me.
That reminds me of the one time when Phil out in VSM asked me to help run an MK tournament. And he's like, I need you to help me run. And I was like, why is that? He's like, because I know you're the only one who's not going to take BS besides my brother. And I disqualified a few top players because it's like, hey guys, I'm here on my time. You're here to compete. Let's do ourselves a favor. Let's act like professionals. I know, we're all here just goofing around at the end of the day, but give me a break. It's funny. Players really hate it when somebody takes their thing very serious. It's like, I'm trying to run an efficient, an efficient thing here. It's like, why are you getting on my case? And I'm sure you've dealt with that a lot, right?
Whoo boy. Yes. I had a taste of that. at Combo Breaker, at my first Combo Breaker, same year, 2018. running a couple brackets. I had one player that was in 2 different brackets. They were overlapping, but said player did not communicate with me. Said player also happened to be a top player. And their opponent was there. Top player wasn't. One of the main rules that Combo Breaker instills upon their volunteer bracket judges is the no top tier privilege, the no friends of yours privilege. If they're late, they're late. If you have to DQ them, DQ them. And I think what people don't understand and take for granted is the fact that, some people might let you slide, but you're eventually going to find that one TO or that one bracket judge that is not going to accept people being late without any form of prior communication. And then you're going to get mad because you got sent to losers bracket in a game that you normally do well in. All you had to do was communicate or just show up on time.
You mentioned Combo Breaker. Did you go there knowing that you were going to help organize, or was that one of those bucket list items in the FGC for you at the time?
Oh no, I went with the full intent of helping out with brackets. I spent a good chunk of time volunteering that weekend. Same thing with 2019. 2019, I only competed in one tournament, and that was the Mystery Game tournament. And if I wasn't running a bracket, I was probably playing Mystery. And funny enough about that, go ahead.
You have mentioned Winter Brawl was the first tournament where you basically decided, let me go and help out because these people randomly disappeared. You run the Combo Breaker. In between the time, Winter Brawl is obviously in January. Combo Breaker, I believe, was held in the summer months, was
May.
it?
It's in May.
Right, so
Memorial Day weekend.
All right, so between January and May, were you getting any sort of reputation as Retrostation as a guy that I want to be running brackets, or again, were you still working on getting that reputation?
Oh no, I was already building the reputation as the kind of person that you want running your brackets, because oddly enough, it was at Winter Brawl where I met Rodney and the team, and that was actually the major where I got my start as KPB. Because back in September of the prior year, someone who's no longer with us was someone that I was fairly, not necessarily close with, but I was in a good enough relationship with them where I could ask them, hey, do you think you could put in a word with me at KPB? I want to sign up as a player. My original intent of KPB was to enter as a player, because that was back when I still wanted to compete, and I wasn't aware of the fact that you can do more than just be a player if you're on a team. And it was after joining KPB where I realized, hey, I may not be the best player at the games that I like to play, but I am a damn good bracket judge and a damn good, broadcast engineer in the making.
Because I have to ask, what drew you exactly to KPB? 2018, it wasn't the amount of teams from the boom where, they dwindled down. There's still a good amount, but again, what drew you to this team?
There were actually a couple of teams that I was scouting at the time. I was scouting a couple of other teams, and I was interested in this team because I like the vibe. I like the wholesome vibe. I liked that, in the conversation that Rodney and I had when we first met, he wanted to basically vet me. He trusted, at the time, other person's recommendation, but he wanted to make sure that my intentions and my objectives for wanting to be on the team were something that would be a good fit for KPB. And we had a very long conversation that Sunday around the time KOF 14 top 8 was going around. And he and I, had a little dialogue, and during the course of the dialogue, we came to realize that, yeah, we were on the same boat where, we wanted to basically strengthen the community and, try to minimize the drama and the bullshit that goes on. Not necessarily drama, but a lot of the problematic behavior that goes unchecked that people just take as the norm when it's not okay.
Is that controllable though?
Or
is it just an inherent thing with this community? And by the way, it's not just the FGC. if anybody follows any kind of gaming community, this is not the only toxic community, but it's just this is the
Yeah.
ones we happen to be in.
Yeah, and the thing is, the FGC is a microcosm of society in general. So to a point, it can be controlled within the spaces that we govern. So if we're hosting events, we have a say as to what is okay and what is not okay. And at the events that we run, it is our responsibility to ensure that everybody is comfortable, that everybody is safe, that nothing not necessarily ratchet, but nothing unseemly is happening. But the thing is we tend to dogpile on victims, and we give them cause to not want to come out in the first place. And then a lot of this stuff gets swept under the rug because, again, top player privilege. And then when it finally blows up, it's just like, oh, why is this happening? Why is this blowing up? It's because we've left stuff unaddressed for so long that it just festers. And then when it finally blows up, people are just sitting there like deer in headlights, when a lot of this stuff could have been prevented if we had stemmed the problematic behavior from the get-go.
Is this something that can be fixed, or is it just something that's going to go on for as long as it will?
It can be fixed. The thing is that everybody needs to be in agreement. Everybody needs to be on the same page as far as what we're trying to establish.
You being a part of the team, organizer, obviously, I recently joined the team again in this capacity. It's been a long time since I've gone out to an FGC event. I mean, I was there during like the boom, as I like to call it, mainly MK9 and Justice, Street Fighter 4, and, stuff like that wasn't anything that was secretive. But like you said, it has to be controlled. It's hard to do so because you have so many people giving opinions and nobody seems to want to play, head chief on anything. But what do you think would be the first step into trying to, just trying to fix whatever problems, the main problem that you would think is the main problem? Like, what would be the first step in your opinion?
The first step to like solving any of this is having TOs be on the same page. Like, because if we're not unified in our vision to like stem problematic behavior, then our efforts are going to be mostly in vain. And what I mean by being unified is, this as well as I do. You've been around the FGC likely longer than I have. There's a lot of politics. There's a lot of backdoor stuff. There's a lot of, there's a lot of like behind the scenes beef with like TOs across regions and even within our own regions. So the first step would be to like basically squash that beef, be like, hey, we may not see eye to eye on things, but at the same time, we're operating in the same community. And if we want this community to be better, then we have to stick together. Like, sometimes people just have to swallow their pride, swallow their egos, get their shit together, and be like, hey, this is how we can make the community better. Let's work together.
As a team, KPB in the background has a lot of, a good reputation. And it's one of the one of the local teams in the area that gets a lot of people say, if you guys want the job to get done, you want to go to those guys. Do you feel that maybe sometimes there are other teams out there that envy you guys for that because you guys are such professionals when it comes to offline events?
If there are, I'm not too concerned with them, because as long as they are not directly interfering with what we're trying to do, because we don't just do FGC. Lately, we've been doing Compete Forever. We've been doing the Madden events. We've been doing, a couple of other events here and there. FGC might be our bread and butter, but this is not our only, we're not one trick ponies. We're not just FGC. We also do a little bit of the sports side. But
yes, you guys do the Madden stuff.
Yeah. And so if people envy us for what we do, then they need to look within themselves and be like, hey, why do I feel this way? Is it because I don't feel confident in my production value? And if I don't feel confident in my production value, then how do I improve my production value so I can stack up to what KPB has to offer? Instead of seeing us as competition, if anything, they should see us as inspiration, because
You
we
know,
do what we can. We're a very small team. We're a very small team. Let's face
you
it.
know,
Some of these other teams are like fucking deep as hell.
I've talked to Afro, Mike, I talked to Ronnie, I talked to Steve, I talked to some of the other guys. I'm going to ask you, does it personally bother you that some people, you know, feel that way towards you guys?
Like I said, that's a them problem. Their feelings are not my responsibility. I'm gonna do what I do. I'm gonna be the TO that I am. And if you don't like how I run my ship, run it better.
You couldn't have said it any better, my friend. You really couldn't have said it any better. What's the kart scene like? You know,
Uh,
obviously everything started with Super Mario Kart. I'm sure there were other kart games before that. I'm sure I'm just not remembering them well. And it's grown to what it is right now. You mainly do Sonic Kart, I believe the game is called.
yeah. The full name is Sonic Rebel Blast 2 Kart. We shorten it to SRB2 Kart because saying the full name is just a mouthful. But yeah, it but kart comes into a long line of kart racers like Nicktoons Kart Racers,
Yes.
CTR, the modern CTR remake, Sonic and Sega All Stars Racing, Sonic and All Stars Racing Transformed, Team Sonic Racing. Like there are a handful of kart racers, and each of them brings a little something different to the table. SRB2 Kart is unique in the sense that it is a racing mod to a 3D platformer known as Sonic Robo Blast 2, SRB2. And SRB2 is a mod built on the old Doom engine. So SRB2 Kart is basically a Doom racer.
When you told me that, when I first saw that, I'm like, what? Wow, I mean, this engine sure has come a long way. That thing was pretty impressive when I was watching you play that. It's like, this is on
Yeah,
the old Doom engine? Wow.
yeah, it's on the old Doom engine, and for better or for worse, it is a game. I I actually discovered the game about 2 years ago. I was watching a random Lythero stream, and he was just playing some random racing game. And I sat there and watched, and I'm like, what the fuck is this? And then I kept watching. And then I kept watching. And then I'm like, you know what? I want to play this game. I picked it up, joined some random server, and got my ass beat for the next month. And by that, I mean I always came in last. I always exploded because last place in that game explodes. It's just like,
Yeah.
it's just like, 8 people are playing. 7th place just crossed the finish line. 8th place go.
We're talking about old brutality in Mortal Kombat style. Boom, limbs all over the place.
Basically.
What
And
what's the
so,
kart scene like? The competitive kart scene.
competitive kart scene. Whew, that's a very interesting one. So there are a lot of sub communities within the kart community that occasionally do competitive events, and the competitive events vary in scope. Some of them are basically speedrunner type events where it's just like where you basically submit your best times, and and everything is judged accordingly. And then you have other events that put out the PvP stuff where you race in large groups, and then scores are tallied according to how you perform. Last year, I hosted a couple of events called Friend Mod races, and what Friend Mod racing is, it basically puts you on. It's basically team racing, where it's one team against the other, and then the friend mod modification, the gameplay mod, would then tally scores depending on your position relative to the race. So you would get 2 points for every opposing player that you were in front of. And if you were in first place, you got an additional point. And this is how you would break ties most of the time. But the first place only getting 1 point was basically to prevent first place from carrying the rest of the team. Everybody else has to pull their weight, has to basically place well if you want to get good scoring.
What's the difference between organizing a kart competitive tournament and an FGC one?
Well, bracket formats are a bit different depending on how you approach them. FGC stuff typically fares in double elimination, where kart can be a bit more flexible and you can do stuff like round robins, you can do stuff like Swiss format, or you can do a mixed format tournament like I did, and you can have it done, across different days, where one day is the Swiss format, and then whatever the results of the Swiss format are, that's the seeding for the double elimination bracket the following day. And I did that mixed format based off of the CTR competitive community, because they have a thriving competitive community where their scale is international, actually. So when I started, brainstorming, rule sets and regulations for the stuff that I was hosting, I actually borrowed a lot from their competitive rule set for their World Cup, and I tailored it to suit the needs of the event that I was trying to run. So my friend mod events are typically Swiss bracket the first day, double elimination the second day. And for me, this ensures that people get as much playtime as possible, because nobody likes going 0-2 in a tournament. No one likes feeling like they wasted their money entering a tournament just to get bopped and they only got to play like 2 matches out of it.
What are offline kart events like? I'm sure the biggest one are the Mario Kart series games, right? Or if you could correct me on that.
Mario Kart would be the one to have that spotlight in terms of like actual like mainstream competitive kart racing. Sonic Kart is still relatively niche. I mean, the community has been growing, especially over the last 2 years, but the mechanics are a lot different than your average kart racer, because a lot of what dictates optimal racing lines for kart compared to other racers is straight momentum. It's literally it's basically taking Sonic mechanics and just throwing them into a kart racer. So momentum is important. Physics are very wacky sometimes because it is the Doom engine. It's a almost 30-year-old engine. You're gonna spot a lot of jank in any sort of mod, especially a racing mod.
If it wasn't for COVID, or even before COVID, have you ever attended an offline kart event?
No, I have not. I just started casually playing kart in 2019, and then as I slowly got better, I started, checking out the competitive events and stuff, and they weren't too bad. Not really my speed as far as like, competition wise, at least not yet, because I'm not at that level. I've been playing for 2 years, but my lines could be a lot better. I've seen people that blow me out of the water by at least 5 seconds, and I'm just like, I just end up salty. I'll be real. I'm just like, God damn it! Why are you winning so much? Stop winning. Stop being so good. But
that's fun. That's part of the fun, isn't it?
Yeah, it's part of the fun, and what makes it fun is having people play, having people at least come try it out. I've gotten friends into it. I've gotten acquaintances into it, and I have a small group that I play with every week. And shout outs to Munoz, shout outs to the Scyther stream server, because we stream at least like almost every Monday whenever Munoz is available, and we play for like 3 to 5 hours depending on how long he wants to go. And all of our races are violent. All of them are violent. We are smacking each other left and right. We are cursing at each other when we get bodied. And there are some times where I literally slap people off the map. It's just like, oh, you're driving? Here, have fun.
Are we talking about Mario Party levels of heat going on?
Yes. There have been some races in recent memory that have been so hotly contested. If we took kart off the screen, you wouldn't know if we were playing kart or if we were playing Mario Party.
What was your least favorite Mario Party minigame of any Mario Party game?
Least favorite? I don't think I had any least favorites. I feel like I was fairly okay in all of them. Especially like the Super Mario Party ones, I was confident that I was very decent at a lot of them, except maybe raising stakes, but that's because I can't flip stake worth of shit.
Dude, is there a Mario Party competitive scene?
I mean, if there isn't, there could be. I mean, if you built a competitive scene off the mini games alone and just eliminated the RNG factor of like the main board game section, I'm pretty sure you can get some sort of competitive scene going. I mean,
That's awesome, man.
honestly, a lot of competitive multiplayer games have like competitive scenes. They may not be as big as the FGC, but they exist.
Of
There's a
course.
competitive scene. There's a competitive scene for Kirby Air Ride. I'm pretty sure there's a competitive scene for like Custom Robo. Like anything that has a PvP aspect, rest assured, somewhere out there is a competitive scene. And all it needs is a solid opportunity to just blow up.
You know, competitive gaming culture in general. I mean, I'm 37 years old and I've been playing games for quite a long time. And, there was a time where I was really engrossed into it. And then I took some time off because I had a family, had kids and everything like that. I helped out a lot in a lot of tournaments, a lot of offline events, even some Comic Cons. And again, this is something I've always wanted to talk about. And it's the influence of Japanese culture on the gaming community. Ever since you were a kid, did you notice how much would it be actually more pop culture, if anything, or is it more Japanese culture that's infused in the gaming community in general? From your experience, what is it?
It's a little bit of both. So the thing is, we grew up, for people that grew up on gaming, a lot of our consoles, a lot of our consoles, a lot of our games, Japanese studios, Japanese companies, Sega, Sony, freaking what was it, Nintendo, Sega, Sony, Nintendo, all Japanese companies. For me, I didn't realize that that there was more to it than just Japanese companies until Microsoft came out with the original Xbox. But ever since then, the three major, Sony, Sega, but back in our heyday, back when I was growing up, the three big Japanese companies were Sega, Sony, and Nintendo. And to this day, Japanese games, a lot of the studios, a lot of the developers, all Japanese.
Let me
And
ask you
so I
this.
feel like,
I
what's
mean,
up?
that's understandable because, like you said, a lot of things were coming out of Japan. Those were the big three, obviously, during the early '90s, late '80s: Nintendo, Sega Genesis, Master System, and everything. But could it only be attributed to just those two companies, or how about Japanese animation being readily available to us, for to watching in the '90s? I mean, Toonami comes out, Dragon Ball Z
Yeah.
is the hottest thing of all time, and for whatever reason, at least again, you tell me if I'm wrong. I've always felt that in a weird way, animation, even American animation, for whatever reason, maybe it embraced the gaming culture in some weird way. Not like it's today. Like you watch something like Robot Chicken, and that just embraces everything together. It, could there be a correlation put together between the times of sci-fi? What was the night block where they just show nothing but Japanese animation? G4
Oh,
for a while
Midnight.
there.
It was what's it, during Toonami's early days, that was Midnight Run.
Yes, and that had Gundam Wing, that had Cowboy Bebop, that had all that good stuff, right?
Yep, Cowboy Bebop, Gundam Wing, Big O at one point,
Mhm.
and then some of that stuff, and then in later iterations of Toonami, they moved the Midnight Run to the primetime blocks. So instead of us having to wait until 12 o'clock, 1 o'clock in the morning to watch anime, we could now watch anime after school. So we still had our DBZ, we still had our Tenchi Muyo, we still had our Sailor Moon, and I'm pretty sure a lot of people that watched that and people that were like dedicated to the Japanese animation, grew up and influenced by it, and that was our gateway into everything else that we would then go on to experience, like Yu Yu
But
Hakusho.
yes, all that Yu Yu
Yeah, go ahead.
Hakusho. I mean, like you said, Sailor Moon, Ronin, and but again, what is it about Japanese culture that resonates with the gaming community whole? Like, what is it
Um,
about this community that just embraces that more than anything else?
I think what it is the fact that it's a culture that is completely different from our own. Like you look at American culture, you look at Japanese culture, two completely different things. Even on a societal level and on an infrastructural level, it's completely different things. They have a bullet train. We have Amtrak. We have the MTA. Two completely different levels of infrastructure and technology. And
you mentioned that. Is it because as kids, maybe we were jealous of their technology? Like you said, bullet train. That's freaking awesome. Okay, we still have the Amtrak, like you said. Hey, it'll get me to where I want to go, but not as fast.
exactly.
What what is it about them? What is it about the country? Because a lot of people say, oh, it's Asian culture. No, it's Japanese culture. That's what everybody loves. I mean, I had some people on here who said their biggest dream is making it out to Japan. Not getting married, not going to see the 3 Egyptian pyramids. Right? No, it's literally going to Japan. Once they made it to Japan, they know their life is complete.
Yeah, and I can get that. And the thing is a lot of people idolize Japanese culture because they just see the fashion, they see the technology, they see a dedication to tradition. And and there's a sense of collectivism in in Japanese culture as far as I can see, as far as I understand. In America, it's all about the individual. It's all about the individualism. And I'm sure you've seen that everywhere you go, where people are more concerned about themselves than they are for their fellow man. It's just like you see somebody getting the shit beaten out of them. People aren't helping. People are recording it and posting it to social media.
That's the
and
thing
that
to
and
do.
that has become the norm in American society and American culture. But the thing is that some people that talk about how they dream of going to Japan, about how they want to live in Japan, a lot of them may or may not be aware of the issues inherent in Japanese culture. There's Japanese culture is rather insular. They're rather xenophobic. They
Oh
a lot
yes.
of a lot of people, Japanese people don't really take kindly to foreigners sometimes. you know they call we're gaijins to them. And the thing is, and also what also doesn't help that is the fact that there are people that go to Americans that go to Japan as tourists, and then they do dumb shit, like the whole thing with if I remember correctly, Logan Paul in the Suicide Forest, and him doing his stupid viral video on that. And it's just like, hey, congratulations. You, as a representative of American society, have made us look like complete and utter assholes. Not that they didn't think we were complete and utter assholes to begin with. So, 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 so the thing is like on top of that, you know, um, I'm pretty sure that a handful of people that want to visit Japan, or rather, or to a greater extent, live in Japan, also kind of, they smoke the tree. Guess what? If you live in Japan, you're going to have to give that shit up. Because from what I remember, and people are free to correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure that Japan as a whole does not take kindly to marijuana. As far as
I wouldn't know.
Yeah. I think I have the memory of a spoon sometimes, but from what I do manage to vaguely remember, I remember reading something about how like you wouldn't be able to smoke weed in Japan, especially if you're trying to live there and you're trying to work there. Yeah, that won't happen. That can't happen.
Is it fair to say that a lot of people in the FGC love Japan so much they have this grand vision of it because the fact that their arcade scene has lasted as long as it has?
Yes, I would not put it past the community to idolize and lionize Japan because of their arcade culture, because of because of the things that they have to offer us as a whole as well, as far as their games, their system, technology in general. I mean, Kawasaki vehicles, Yamaha vehicles, Toyota, Nissan, Honda, all Japanese car brands. Like
That's right, and they
I,
became very
yeah,
big here, like in the mid '80s, I believe it is, after all the
yeah,
gas regulations here.
yep, Kawasaki. And the thing is that some of these brands aren't even exclusive to automotive stuff. Like Yamaha also does musical instruments.
Yes,
They also do musical equipment. What's it? If I remember correctly, like the main thing, the sound chip driving the Sega Genesis was a Yamaha branded sound chip.
I believe it was. Yes, I believe it was a Yamaha sound chip. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah,
Jeez, man.
Konami, like Japanese culture and the effects of like Japanese technology are more ingrained into our society than people are aware of. But that doesn't mean that the culture isn't without its faults. That doesn't mean that it's without its shortcomings.
Do you
We can
think it's fair?
appreciate. Go
I'm
ahead.
sorry. No, go ahead. You can finish that thought. I was going to ask you
Oh
next.
yeah. So like I think it's perfectly, like, just in general, I think it's perfectly fine to appreciate and want to visit Japan and appreciate everything that they've given us growing up. But I also want people to be mindful of the shortcomings of the the nationalism that comes from Japanese culture, a lot of the xenophobia, a lot of the problematic stuff, a lot of the imperialistic agenda. Shout outs to Kazuma Hashimoto, a Japanese immigrant that I follow, they're currently living in Germany, but they post articles all the time about like why we should look at Japanese media critically instead of buying into the common narratives of like the whole, oh, samurai equals noble. It's just like, no, they use chivalry as an excuse to bully the lower class.
Do you
And
think it's?
and
I'm
they,
sorry.
do I think, sorry, I keep cutting you off and I'm so sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, go ahead. Keep going, man.
No, that was it. That was basically my segue into what it is you wanted to ask me.
And it's I was actually gonna say, do people not want to look at that dark side of Japanese culture and the way things are over there because they're afraid of the real world? It's you know what, I'm gonna keep it over here because this makes me happy. I don't want to know anything about the real world, which happens a lot here too, as well.
Yeah, it happens a lot. It happens a lot even within our own culture. Perfect example. People want to, like the whole thing with the issue with black people, where people want to take parts of black culture for themselves, but don't want to educate themselves on the societal issues that black people deal with on a daily. They don't want to deal with the they don't want to learn about the systemic racism. They don't want to learn about the prison industrial complex or the school to prison pipeline, because they're like, hey, I just want to enjoy the culture. I just want to enjoy that at face value. Like, I don't want to, I don't want to go any further. And I feel like that same approach is taken when it comes to talking about, oh, I want to live in Japan, oh, I want to learn Japanese so I can live there. And it's just like, and people don't understand, and some people don't understand just how much of a commitment that takes, because the spoken Japanese language can be straightforward enough, but when it comes to being literate and writing, bro, that is over 2,000 Japanese characters you'd have to learn. And from
Oh
what I
yeah.
remember, and by Japanese standards, I don't think you're considered literate until you've memorized and can successfully use at least 1,300 of that entire alphabet.
Do you think a lot of the FGC's love for the Japanese culture is why they always cheered for the Japanese top players against,
Yes,
American players,
absolutely.
and why is that?
Absolutely, because they see the Japanese players, they see how strong they are, and because of the link between hey, Japanese game, Japanese players, they be it's kind of like the whole, hey, they're the hometown people, basically. If you think about it, they're the home team, for lack of a better term. They're the home team, so we're gonna root for the home team, even though the events are taking place in America. And the thing is I can respect the Japanese scene for for its strength, for its consistency, but I don't think they're infallible. And when people are rooting for some of these players, it's like they put them on a pedestal. It's like, oh, they can do no wrong. They they can't fuck up, so to speak. Oh, these players are godlike, and it's just like, if we spent if we spent that energy that we have spent lionizing the Japanese players, if we spent that energy into developing our own community, which we have, I will give our community credit for that. I want to say in the last 3 years, we have been getting our shit together. We have been strengthening our scenes to the point where the American players can keep up with the Japanese players. Look
Let
at
me ask
Sonic
you
Fox.
this.
Look at the Kill Stage.
Let me ask you this, and this is going to be a somewhat of a hot take. And first off, is it fair to say the majority of big time competitors in this country, they're really good friends, they respect the Japanese players, correct?
Yes, from what I understand, yes.
All right, that's fine, and not just Japanese. We're talking about Korean, whoever, any foreign player that comes from that area. The top players
International
here,
players, yes.
yes, international players specifically there, because I don't know how some international players are thought of here, like when it comes from Latin America and those parts of the world. But we're only mainly speaking to Asian. Now, the majority of people who are always, rooting for the Japanese, the Korean, yeah, come over here and kick America's ass, because whatever. Again, this is going to be a hot take. You tell me if it's right or wrong. Those people are mainly in forums. They're never going to go out to any events. Sure, they'll watch on Twitch, just to put in as many emoticons or whatever the heck those things are called. Is it because they want to see themselves? Is it because they want to see themselves as, this is how I want to live my life, with respect, with honor, or whatever it is over there? Whereas they look at some American players, and let's be honest, a lot of them, how can I put this nicely? It's a lot of them just big mouths, a lot of them, in your face and everything like that. Is it mainly because they don't want to look at themselves that way, and they want to be more like, somebody like Daigo, somebody like Tokido? Like, you know what I'm going with that? Again, it's a hot take.
No,
But
I get it. And I get what you're saying. You're asking me if the people that cheer on the Japanese or the Korean players to come and kick America's ass because they want to live vicariously through those players, because they don't want to associate with the American scene. You're not too
yeah,
far
it's,
off,
it's not
actually.
it's not because they sympathize with dropping A bombs on them, so from World War II. But yeah,
Yeah. No, but my thing is, and part of it is that, but at the same time, it's just like, yeah, we have a lot of loud people in the FGC. We have a very diverse cast of characters in the FGC. Some quiet, some loud, some wholesome, some chaotic. Um, but I feel like that the the massive spectrum of personalities that is what makes us who we are as players. Like, we're loud, we're in your face, but at the same time, we are being true to ourselves. We are being true to ourselves. We're being true to our ideals. Where we're not afraid to be ourselves in our space, because a lot of us come from less than ideal environments, and we use gaming as like a reprieve, as a retreat from that.
why can't people
So,
see that?
good question.
You've
But
been
yeah,
organizing. You've seen a lot of things. You've been in the background long enough. I mean, 2 years, like you said. I believe you said it was around 2019 when you
three,
first really started. But
no, 3 years. 3 years.
okay, 3 years, yes, because you've done it as a competitor as well. But again, everything you just said, why can't some people just see it that way? Why can't they just embrace that? That's what we are. You know.
Yeah. Um, I think it's because, again, it's all about the individualism at the end of the day. people aren't really concerned with other people, and that's also endemic in the community as well. Like, it's not just endemic to the community, but because the community is a microcosm of society as a whole, and because American society values individualism, parts of the FGC also value individualism, and then that's why we have a lot of this tension, a lot of this beef among players, among TOs, even among content, even among content creators. There's always beef somewhere, because someone is always trying to one up the other person,
Is
and
it
not
a?
necessarily
I'm sorry.
in the healthy context either.
Is there a danger to that? Having that mindset that, even though I'm American, all I want to do is just, all I want to do is embrace everything Japanese. At least, at least in the, in the competitive space, where maybe you just blind yourself, where you're not having fun and you're just being this crazy. I mean, I don't want to call you a national or anything like that, but it's just where you just have this blind hatred or love or whatever it is that you want to call it. Like, is there a danger to that?
There is a danger to that, because if that sort of ideology, if that sort of behavior is unchecked, then that can stem into behavior that transcends the community, and then that puts us into a whole other predicament altogether. But yeah, it's just like, we're individuals. A lot of us don't come from the best homes. Some of us a lot of us may come from broken families. Everybody, I can guarantee you, everybody that is in the FGC has some sort of shit that they're struggling with in some way, shape, or form. And and the FGC and just gaming in general is supposed to be our retreat. It's supposed to be our safe space. It's supposed to be a place where we can commune with people who are interested in the same things that we do. We can sit there, play games, and this is how we bond with people. This is how we forge connections in the community. So when all this bullshit happens, where people don't know how to keep their hands to themselves, where we have to deal with sexual assault incidents, in various facets of the community, especially over the last year, it's just like, that's not being a community, especially when we're not doing the best we can for sexual assault victims.
Should cosplaying be banned from offline events, especially some cosplayers that they come in and dress up as one of, some ridiculously scandally clad outfits, especially with everything that's going on? Should that be banned?
I don't think it should be banned. I do think it should be moderated, especially if it's an event that touts itself as an all ages event. If we're gonna crack down on the Ahegao print on controllers, on consoles, on hoodies and stuff, with the stupid exaggerated orgasm face that fucking basement dwellers seem to be obsessed with. So it's like, if we're gonna crack down on that, then we need to crack down on non-consensual displays of what could be perceived sexuality in all ages spaces. If it's an 18 plus space, I don't give a shit. But if you're at an event where it's a public space and it's an all ages space, and that's something that we need to be mindful of, because there are going to be children present. Children are impressionable, and if we're trying to foster this community to thrive in the long term, then we got to think about the kids too.
Let me ask you this: since you said all ages or 18 and above, what are you in favor of, especially after the last year and a half of all this stuff that's come out within the community, Smash Brothers, mainly the Smash Brothers, but there's been a lot of other stuff that's come out. What are you in favor of as an organizer?
As an organizer, I am not opposed to the idea of 18 plus events. However, if people do want to do all ages events, because let's face it, there is some young talent in the community. There is talent out there, that are still in middle school, still in high school, that can compete with some of us adults. Perfect example, Sonic Fox. Sonic Fox has been competing for the better half of a decade, and they're only 22, 23? They've been playing since they were 14, 15. They were beating my ass in Skullgirls back when they were 14, 15.
Yeah, he's ridiculously talented, that kid, man.
They're ridiculously talented, and that's just an example of the young talent that can flourish in the community if we nurture it. But if we are going to have all ages events, then we need to be responsible. We need to make sure that the kids are safe.
Because the
There
F.
needs to be some sort of
No, sorry, go ahead.
there needs to be some sort of parental supervision or some sort of legal guardianship and some sort of legal accountability where we can safeguard these kids, where these kids can play with the older players like we used to. But for us, safety is tantamount. Safety is the priority. That is non-negotiable.
I've talked to Mike a little bit, and he's told me about a code of conduct that the community is coming up with. And I don't have much of I don't know what's going on with that. He merely tells me a few things about it. Do you think, if you know anything about it, do you think it's going in a good direction? Do you think the community is embracing it, or unfortunately, because of this day and age where we live, how we live, where especially in this country where everything is just politicized, it's like no, no, this, or yes, yes, that. Is there a possibility that might come to fruition and everybody's going to adopt that because of everything that has been going on? Or is there still a big opposition to it where some TOs might say, you know what, I'm just going to drop it. I'm just going to go about how I've been doing things. Everybody just take care of themselves the best you can.
The FGCOC is a step in the right direction. But in order for anything to come onto fruition, it goes back to what I said earlier about how we all need to be on the same page. We all need to be in accord with what we aim to accomplish with the FGCOC. Fightcade, like, we're already in a step in the right direction. Fightcade has adopted the COC. Like, if you enter a lobby, one of the rules is you are bound by the COC. You violate the COC, you get banned. That sort of thing. But at the same time, Fightcade isn't exactly the best with their moderation, as we've seen on social media over the last couple of months.
Hey, quick question. Fightcade, obviously, like you said, they adopted the COC, but Fightcade obviously is an online platform. So how are they enforcing it?
I think they're handling it the way any other online platform would. It's just like like a report function. It's just like, hey, you got any incidents of bad behavior? Report it. Provide receipts. We'll look into it, and then we act accordingly. I couldn't say much because I'm not part of the Fightcade moderation team, so I'm not sure exactly how they operate in terms of their investigative capacity. But I imagine that's how it would go.
All right, then. Well, it's 2021. We've gone through a year and a half of all this stuff, and New York, I don't know how much they're going to be opening up soon with the whole CDC thing saying that soon enough people are going to be walking around without masks. And I believe somebody already mentioned that they're going to start doing offline events. You yourself, are you looking forward to getting back to offline events? And if so, I mean, is that going to be just a big sigh of relief when you're able to do that again?
It'll be a big sigh of relief when I'm able to safely go out to offline events again. I have missed offline events. I have not been able to see people in over a year because events are the only way I can connect with a couple of people, because events bring in people from around the country, even around the world. And these events are opportunities to meet, to connect, and to bond with people that I wouldn't be able to hang out with otherwise. Like, I wouldn't be able to hang out with Japanese players without one of us flying to the other country. But events like Combo Breaker give us that space where we can come together. We can share ideas as far as fighting games are concerned, or just games in general. And then it's just like a nice gathering. And even though I'm not the biggest fan of like giant groups, I think giant groups are like just socially tiring for me as an individual. But in events, I thrive because I'm never bored. There's always something to do. So it's like, oh, I don't want to play this game anymore. I can go over to a casual station, like a couple systems down, play another game altogether. If not, then I go hang out in the general area and just shoot the shit with people that I haven't seen in months. There's always something to do. There's always an opportunity to connect with people. And that opportunity to connect with people is what I miss most.
You yourself, you're an organizer. You do a lot for the community when you can. And in the last year and a half, we've seen what's happened to the world, but slowly a lot of sports have been able to have their events, like basketball, football, that stuff in a controlled environment. Obviously, the FGC. How come? I mean, from what knowledge you have of it, how come nobody ever bothered trying to do a socially distanced event? You have the event spaces, and from my understanding, because I looked into it myself, a lot of event spaces were open to do business. Obviously, you would have to follow, you would have to follow their rules, social distancing and everything like that. With the way FGC tournaments are set up, where you could easily just have one system, somebody sitting here, the other one sitting there, two monitors, one to each player. Excuse me. Like, why didn't nobody try to do any offline events where you could possibly limit it to maybe 48 competitors?
I think it was because the general consensus among the community was while the event was running rampant, while the pandemic was at its peak, the consensus was it wasn't a good idea to throw offline events, even with all the social distancing, even with all like the safety measures you could take.
Well,
Ralph, I'm pretty sure you know.
I'm not talking about, excuse me, I'm not talking about, when it was at its peak. I'm talking about maybe even 4 months ago when, everything was just a little bit more relaxed, where everything was maybe at a 25, 30% capacity. And I think I know where you were going to ask me, but please go ahead.
It wasn't so much of a question; it was just more like a confirmation. Ralph, I'm sure you know that there's like the FGC stereotype, not even among the Smash crew, but just the FGC in general, where hygiene is questionable at best. So, taking that into consideration, in conjunction with the pandemic, regardless of whether standards were relaxed 4 months ago or not, it's just like it's an honor system kind of thing, and if you can't trust people to like wash their hands and take showers and just exercise just general hygiene, why would you want to put out an event and then risk being the event where someone got COVID? I think that was the main reason why no one wanted to put an event, because you could exercise all the safety, you could exercise all the safe stuff, you can be compliant with all the safety regulations, you can be compliant with everything, you can wash stuff down, but things still happen.
Of course.
Things still happen. All it takes is for one person to fuck up and for someone else to get COVID as a result of that fuck up. And then that event, that reputation goes straight into the dumpster. And nobody wanted to risk that.
Could one of the faults to that is because when we think of offline events, we think of multiple games. How about a single game event, or is Street Fighter the only one who could really do that, where you could possibly guarantee 48 players in a region?
I can see that, because Street Fighter is basically like one of the mainstream games, but there are a handful of games out there that could guarantee a turnout of 48 people. Dragon Ball FighterZ is one of them. Tekken is one of them. There's a handful of games out there, but I don't think it's the issue of meeting player cap. It's just no one wanted to take the risk of being branded as the event where someone got COVID.
Now, going forward, where do you see the FGC post-COVID?
FGC post-COVID, if I'm being real, a lot of us are still going to be wearing our masks. There are people that got into the habit of wearing masks just so they didn't get sick. Shout outs to LAKEY on the team. That man always wore masks to every single event that I saw him at, just so he wouldn't get confunk, just so he wouldn't get the complague, And I've never heard about that guy getting sick in the 3 years that I have known him.
What's the NYC FGC going to look like?
New York FGC? That's a good question. Hopefully NYC Tekken gets back up and running. Next Level has resumed operations for the most part. They're starting, they've stopped their RSVPs. They're all walk-ins now. Waypoint Lounge out in the Lower East Side is expanding their hours from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. as far as I understand. So things are slowly going back to normal, but I think people are going to be more mindful of just health and safety moving forward, because we as a community were crippled in terms of like having offline events for over a year. I don't think anyone ever wants to go through that again.
No, of course not. We don't want to go. I think it's fair to say everybody just wants their normal lives to get back, because by all means, this is our hobby. This is what we like to do. This is why we get out of the house during weekends. I always joke around that during that time, weekends were at such a premium because everything was happening. Offline events for any kind of video game, Comic-Con, and that's been just taken away. And I know some people are, battling depression because the FGC is no longer here, at least what it was when it comes to offline. Playing online is not the same thing to a lot of people, because there's something about getting together. I mean, these are your friends, these are your comrades, right?
Exactly. It's like there's something about rubbing shoulders, talking shit face to face that you can't replicate online. It's just like I can talk to somebody, I can shit talk somebody on Discord, and it's not the same as shit talking them to their face.
Of
Like
course.
there's that personal aspect that isn't there, and it's that experience that people want. And on top of that, going back to what you said as far as like offline not being the same, there's also games where offline is unplayable. Looking at you, Sam Show, where just the net code is just hot garbage, and that's why everyone has been clamoring for rollback for all of the new games that are coming out. And this is why, and in our current climate, this is why people are like, hey, if you're putting out a fighting game and you're giving it netcode and it's not rollback, it's most likely going to be DOA, because delay-based netcode does not work on American infrastructure.
Speaking of Samurai Showdown, I know Hibiki was announcing what's his name, Amakusa, but
yeah,
we know the netcode in that game is awful, and because of it has struggled. That's just the way it works. This is a big country, and some people don't have access to some of the internet like we have. And like you said, if it doesn't have rollback, it's going to be DOA on arrival, at least to the overall majority who play online. That's why how important it is for KOF 15 to have rollback.
It's super important. SNK has said that they're working on an internal rollback solution, so that makes me cautiously optimistic, because it's an internal rollback solution. We don't know if it's going to be good. We don't know if it's going to be bad. Street Fighter V was an internal rollback solution, and that rollback solution is ass.
Yes.
Let's be real. CFN can be hot garbage sometimes. When it works, when it decides to work, it works. When it doesn't, it is a dumpster fire. But going back to the delay-based netcode not working on American infrastructure, it's not so much about the power of internet. It's just the simple fact of wireless connectivity being susceptible to packet loss. But the reason delayed-based netcode works in Japan and not in America is because Japan is smaller than California. You are trying to stretch that infrastructure to 50, 60, 75 times the size of Japan.
Yep.
That's spreading a very thin net, and that net is going to have holes. That's why delay-based will never work on American infrastructure. As far as with the way American online infrastructure is now, delay-based will never work. Delay-based will be forever a dumpster fire.
You know what I don't understand, and going back into rollback, I mean, what was it? Third Strike Online Edition used GGPO. Last time I checked, I believe GGPO, you don't even need to have a license. It's free. What is it about these companies that they just don't utilize GGPO? I remember the big thing back then was, it takes up a lot of resources or whatever the heck it was. Well, Capcom made it work with the Third Strike port. I believe Skullgirls uses GGPO, does it not?
I believe it does. I believe it uses GGPO. From what I remember, I haven't played in a hot minute, so my memory's fuzzy on that. But GGPO is the common rollback solution. But the thing with rollback nowadays is a lot of the games require internal rollback solutions because you can't just copy paste GGPO code into a game that uses 3D models, that uses 3D
Right.
assets. Skullgirls, Third Strike, everything that's on Fightcade, those are all sprite-based games. Those aren't 3D model games. So GGPO is appropriate for that sort of situation. But for 3D games like KOF 15, for Strive, they need to have internal rollback solutions because that's the only way they're gonna make it functional.
All right, that's the truth. Now, speaking of KOF 15, man, I'm sure we're all happy for DZ having his team back, right?
he's only been clamoring for his team for years now. But no, I am really happy that the Orochi team is back. I actually, whenever I do like play KOF, I'm actually probably one of the most casual KOF players on the team, because KPB is primarily, they're KOF buffs. A lot of their passion lies in SNK. But as far as KOF is concerned, I'm one of the more casual players. Like, I've dabbled in 14, I've dabbled in 98, I've dabbled in 2002. I am probably one of the only people on the team that would want to play Maximum Impact Regulation A, because that was actually one of my favorite Maximum Impacts. It was like, wow. Maximum Impact is busted. I mean, 97 was busted. 98 original 98 was busted. Original 2002 was busted. 13 was busted. But you can't let me have Maximum Impact? The fuck out of here.
Yeah, we don't want to play 2K2 UM because the angel glitch is in there. It's like, really, guys? I mean, but it's a better game, but I don't know, man. Some people are weird like that.
It's the angel glitch. I mean, listen, the KOF brand is jank. No matter what KOF game you play, no matter how polished it is, there is going to be some level of unmitigated bullshit. And if you are going to enjoy the KOF franchise for what it is, that is something that you have to come to terms with.
Dude, what was the series on the handheld Neo Geo Pocket Color? Was it KOF R or something like that?
I don't remember. That's a good question.
I think that may have been the only KOF game I played, or maybe it's because nobody played it enough to find a whole bunch of horse crap in there. But it was a little bit of a fun game. I'm not gonna lie. It was like a weird version of KOF 99, if I remember correctly. I'm pretty sure it's called King of Fighters R.
It was King of Fighters R1.
And that was for the Neo Geo Pocket Color, right?
Yeah, that was for the Neo Geo Pocket. The one you're thinking of for the Pocket Color was KOF R2.
R2. Hey, speaking of which, you put it in the group the other day. What was it that you modded? Was that a Game Gear?
Oh no, that was a GBA, actually, Game Boy Advance.
Did it have the new LCD mod that I've been hearing a lot about?
Yes, it does. It has the IPS LCD upgrade. I've been learning how to do those for work. It's really fun. I'm a very manually oriented kind of person. So anything where I can like work with my hands, whether it's like building stuff or taking stuff apart, it's something that I find myself I find very enjoyable. So, when an opportunity came where it's just like, hey, I can mod GBAs for my job. It's just like, hey, I'll learn. It's a fairly straightforward process. I invested in the equipment that I need to work from home to, do that stuff at home. And it's just, the end results are just so satisfying, because I've put some of this stuff out for sale at my job, and a couple of the ones that I modded and brought to the store, modded at the store and put out for sale, were gone within the hour, because there's been such a demand for retro and handheld stuff over the last year because of the pandemic.
You know what's funny, man? You mentioned that, and like recently, I had a few people at my job help me mod a Game Gear. I found a Game Gear at a yard sale, and God bless the modding community, man. Some of those hobbyists who take the time to put these upgrades out, like the Game Gear LCD upgrades, are amazing. Like I opted only for the adaptive backlight from RetroKai out in France, because that's good enough for me. I mean, I get the fun that people get for seeing these old systems, like in current mobile style screens. like the
LCDs,
Game
yeah.
Boy ones. Yeah. And again, God bless those people, man. But like some of those eBay prices are insane. It's like a Game
Yeah.
Gear just modded with a LCD screen that people are selling them for $300, and people are buying them, like you said.
Yeah. The Game Gears the Game Gears like stock and with new capacitors in them. Well, typically I think they'll sell on average for like 150, 175.
Yes,
And the LCD and the reason that the LCD modded ones are so expensive is because the part itself is expensive.
of course. Yes, of
So
course.
yeah, so anything that's modded, anything you see modded out on the online marketplace takes into account, like parts and labor, but mostly parts because some of these parts are hella expensive.
Yes, they are. What's it like working at a video game store, especially one of prestige like Video Games New York?
It's super fun. It's also been very educational for me because I've learned a lot about systems that I didn't get to play growing up. Like I've learned a lot about the Dreamcast. I learned a lot about Atari because people come in asking questions about this stuff, and if I don't know, someone else will, and in the process, I just end up learning, and then I end up passing out. I pass on that knowledge to people that may not know, and it's been it's retail, so it comes with the trials and tribulations of working retail in general, like people who don't want to put on their mask or wear their mask properly. But you learn so much about games, these obscure games that are like extremely valuable, and this is why they're valuable, and then you understand like what people gravitate toward in terms of what they want to play. Like a lot of people play the common stuff. And then you'll see people that'll ask for like some of the more niche stuff, some of the stuff that isn't commonly asked for. Or sometimes they'll ask you for recommendations and you point them into the direction of a game that, they would have never considered playing otherwise. And they're like, you know what? I'm going to take you up on that recommendation. And then they'll come back to you and they'll be like, hey, so that recommendation, fuck yeah, great game. Awesome job. And that gives me a good feeling because I enjoy a wide variety of games. Like I said before, that I gravitate more towards action games, but I play a little bit of everything except horror because fuck horror. Horror, horror,
Exactly.
horror just horrid things to my anxiety, and I want none of it.
Well, you said with the pandemic, a lot of retro games have prices have been going up and collecting has been going up. I think it's fair to say that we've moved on from the Atari 2800 era of those collectors. Some of those people, are much
Twenty
older
six
than,
hundred.
yeah, excuse me, 2600 and whatever goofy other systems there were back then. Yeah, after, before the video game crash. But
Yeah.
since you work at Video Games New York, and that is a pretty big store, I mean, how many collectors do you see coming in always asking, hey, do you happen to have a sealed NES game? Or, hey, do you happen to have anything sealed for Super Nintendo? Is that a
I
big
don't.
community for you guys?
A part of it is a considerable part of the community, but um people aren't really asking for Nintendo or Super Nintendo stuff. A lot of the more common questions, at least from my experience, a lot of the common questions are regarding the Dreamcast, the PS2, the GameCube, Game Boy Advance. Those are the four that I hear, and N64. Sorry, those are the five, because from my recollection, N64 has consistently been like one of our best-selling consoles, and even more so during the pandemic, to the point where we've actually been sold out of Super Mario 64 and Mario Kart 64 for a very long time,
Wow.
because we used to have a massive stock. But then the pandemic happened, people stayed home, people ended up having to stay home, people wanted stuff to play, and people decided to, revisit their childhoods. So a lot of people bought, N64s, a lot of people bought PS2s, and people consistently would buy Mario Party, Mario Kart, Mario 64, GoldenEye, Star Fox, all the multiplayer stuff. And
You see,
people
man,
and
and
people are,
Nintendo had it right all those years ago. Everybody still wanted to
yep,
sit on their couches and play. They saw the future. It wasn't The Simpsons
yep,
this time.
yep. And then and then if people aren't asking for N64 stuff, they're asking for PS2 stuff. More specifically, the WWE stuff. We used
Of
to have a
course.
lot of wrestling. We used to have a lot of wrestling games in our showcase. Now we're lucky if we see one or two come in because
Oh, trust me, I know, man. I'm still holding on to my copy of WWF WrestleMania, I believe it was, and No Mercy, because me and my brother and my friends, man, that was like the greatest game of all time.
Yeah, people ask for No Mercy. We get No Mercy like maybe like once in a blue moon, and it sells. And most often it sells the same day.
Oh yeah,
It's wild, man. It's wild. GameCube stuff. A lot of the main franchises are hard to find. Like all the Mario stuff, like Mario Sunshine, all the Legend of Zelda stuff, like Twilight Princess, the Ocarina of Time and Master Quest collection.
and what's the worst part of working at a video game store? Well, is it the fact that it's retail and you have to deal with some people who are just bunch of a-holes here and then?
Oh yeah, honestly I think that's the worst part. It's just the general retail territory aspect of it. But
I'm sorry, say again.
The retail aspect of it is what kills me, because some people come in. There was I'll give you a perfect example. One time I had a phone call within the last week. So our business is called our business is called Video Games New York.
Yes.
Someone calls, I answer the phone. It's like, hey, you guys sell video games, right? It's yeah.
God, come on.
You guys are in New York, right? Yeah. Like I was flabbergasted by the fact that those are the first two questions that came out of that person's mouth when our name is literally Video Games New York. Why? Just why?
What did you do?
I just answered I just answered their questions normally. They had asked me if we had a specific game for sale. I told them we did, and they were like, "Okay, thank you." I hung up the phone, and I'm just like, I can't. It's the kind of thing you have to laugh at to maintain your sanity.
especially nowadays with the way this country is, where everything is just everything is either left or right. It's like, can't we just have a civil conversation anymore? Oh, that's freaking great, man. That's a great story. That might actually be the best thing that's ever been said on this show.
Hey, do you guys sell video games? You guys in New York? It's just like, what? Listen to yourself.
I'll ask you a question, man, about organizing. I mean, you're still a pretty young guy. I've talked to you before. You always like to educate yourself about things. I mean, how much, like, you can't really tell that, you can't really see into the future, obviously. But how much longer do you think you'll be doing organization for the competitive scene?
Honestly, as I'll probably do it as long as the community's willing to have me. Let's be real. I'm 31, but I don't see myself leaving anytime soon. And as long as I'm a part of the team, then it's just like, hey, I'm gonna go to an event. If they need the help, and if I'm available, I'm gonna jump in. That's just how it is. That's just how I am, because I'm all about getting people in and out. Because the way I see it, you're gonna be at this event for a weekend.
Yes.
You're going to be competing, most likely. But you're also probably going to want to explore. You're going to want to play casuals, and you're going to want to shoot the shit with people that you haven't seen in a hot-ass minute. So with that in mind, my objective is to get you in and out of your pool as fast as possible. But I can only get people in and out as fast as I can if people are there, people are ready to play. Like, the way I set things up, it's like I set 2 people to play on a setup. I set everybody to set up on their setup, whatever. If I have people left over, it's just like, all right, you guys are on deck here, you guys are on deck there. As soon as they are done with their match, you immediately hop in and you guys start playing. I try to minimize downtime as much as I can, just so people have more time to do the things that they want to do.
When everything opens up again, what's the one major you can't wait to step foot in again? Do you still have a bucket list, or has that bucket list item been crossed off your list?
I haven't really had a bucket list for events. I've been more flexible and like, hey, I'll go where the wind takes me. If there's an opportunity to go to an event and I can take that opportunity, I will. But as far as events that I'm really looking forward to, I'm looking forward to the next offline combo breaker because I have a score to settle with people.
And guys, look for him at Combo Breaker. Maybe you're one of those people he has a score to settle with, right?
I mean, if they're in the mystery tournament, then yeah, I'm gonna have a score to settle. And the reason I say this, and story time here. 2019 Combo Breaker. I entered the mystery tournament just because I wanted to. I didn't really care about anything else. I was like, you know what? I'm gonna play the mystery game, play a bunch of random games, see how I do. And that was just something to keep me occupied whenever I wasn't running brackets. I was literally running brackets the entire weekend.
What was the first game?
So, I forget honestly. Damn. I gotta go back and check the VODs for that one. But context for people who don't know.
I'm sorry to cut you off. The majority of mystery games are obscure Dreamcast games, aren't they? Like Project Justice, Psychic Force, Plasma Sword.
No. Ooh. They are part of the pool, but they are not just Dreamcast. So for people who aren't familiar with what the mystery tournament is and how it's run, every round of the tournament is a completely different game. Doesn't matter if it's winner's round, it's loser's round. Games are different. So if you're in winner's round 2, you're not playing the same game as loser's round as that same stage in the bracket. Loser's run has their own separate pool of games to play from. Winner's bracket will have their own separate pool of games to play from. So, and you will not know what you are playing until you sit down. And for the most part, whatever you play in mystery tournament will not be a game that has a currently active community. So you will not see Street Fighter 5. You will not see Soul Calibur 6. You will not see KOF 15 whenever it comes out. You will be playing older games, and you may not even be playing them on the optimal system to play them on. Like you might be playing SVC Chaos for Xbox. This happened in 2019, by the way. And it's not limited to fighting. It's not limited to fighting games either, and that's the best part. It's any game that has a competitive multiplayer aspect to it, where it's not a complete time sink, is a viable candidate for being a mystery game. I'll give you a perfect example. I will give you one of the games that I had to play in pools, Ralph, and you'll know this game. Atari's Joust.
Oh.
Joust. I had to play Joust as one of my first mystery games.
How did that go?
I won 3-0.
That's awesome.
Another one of the games I had to play early on was Mighty Morphing Power Rangers, the fighting edition for Super Nintendo.
I remember that game, and I hated that game. I hated that game.
That was the first time I had ever put my hands on that game, and I enjoyed it for what it was because it's mystery tournament. But yeah, I had a solid run. I went undefeated until I hit winners finals, and then I lost to Dasset Bro in this stupid boxing game called Cruz Brothers for PS4. To this day, it is the worst game, hands down, that I have ever played in my entire life. And I'm not just saying that because I lost. It's called Cruz Brothers. It's called Cruz Brothers.
Can't say I ever heard of that one.
Good. Consider yourself fortunate. But yeah.
By the way, that mystery game tournament, it fills up, right? Because I believe it's capped. Like it fills up pretty fast.
It is capped at 100. It's capped at 128, if I remember correctly.
Oh, I thought it was like only 64 players or something.
No, it's either 128 or 256. I forget. It's one of those two caps because of the time it takes. Just because of the amount of time it takes to transition between rounds for games, they don't want to have to do that for like too many setups and too many pulls. But yeah,
right.
So I lost to Cruz Brothers, and then my game in losers finals was the basketball game from Capcom Sports Stars or Capcom Sports Club. I'm sorry, Capcom Sports Club.
I'm trying to figure out that game.
Capcom Sports Club had 3 different games you could play. It was basketball, tennis, and soccer, and they had us play the basketball game. And I got fucking destroyed because I can't play sports games worth a damn half the time.
Not even NBA Jam?
Again, NBA Jam, I don't think I've ever tried. I think the only sports game that I remember playing and enjoying back when I was growing up was Space Jam for PlayStation. But all in all, I went a lot farther than I expected. I made 3rd, and that's something I definitely want to do again and hopefully take the gold. Like 2020, I was like, I'm going to Combo Breaker. I'm getting the dub. I'm getting that trophy. I'm settling the score with Dastard Bro and anybody else and up to snuff. And, those are the only 2 people I lost to. It's like, I'm selling the score with them. I'm getting that dub. 2020 is my year. And then COVID said, no.
No, not happening, buddy. Have they announced that they're going to be back for 2021, or is it an online tournament?
Online. They're doing an online thing. At the last weekend of May, they're doing. I don't know if they're doing tournaments, but I know they're doing this community thing, this community effort called Look Alive, and they've contacted a bunch of like different organizers from like across the country who have consistently been doing online events throughout the pandemic.
Okay.
So there's going to be like a showcase, like exhibition. I'm not entirely sure on the details. I have to look into it, but they are doing something on their typical Combo Breaker weekend this year.
Oh, that's awesome, man. I'm sure the community is looking forward to that. Really, 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 really big, right? They're really looking forward to that. Excuse me. I'm mumbling my words.
Yeah.
Jeez. Well, listen, man. It's was a lot of fun talking to you. You had a lot of fun stories. I enjoyed it. I'm sure Steve enjoyed it as well. And like I always ask everybody, man, when could everybody reach you? What are your social media outlets?
I am primarily on Twitter at KPB Retrostation. That's pretty much the main way to reach me. I don't stream often enough to plug my Twitch. So if you guys want to reach me, if you guys want to talk shop, feel free to follow me. Feel free to message me. My DMs are open. Please don't be weird. But yeah, I'm pretty approachable. I'm pretty friendly. Just don't be weird. That's it.
And guys, you know what? You're absolutely right, man. It's we had a rough year and a half. There were enough weird people in the community. Let's hope they actually came out less weird. And let's just hope we all get back to our normal lives of having fun at FGC events or having fun. You know what? I don't even want to call them FGC events. It's more like a weekend hanging out with your friends, because that's what the FGC is, really. It's we're all there hanging out with friends that this is really how we see them nowadays. And there's competition going on, but again, it's really more about hanging out with your buddies, right?
Exactly. It's more about spending time with the people you care about, spending time with people you wouldn't be able to spend time with otherwise.
Exactly.
Because this is the thing we love. And if more people understood that, if more people embrace that instead of like being weird and being problematic, then I feel like the community would be better off.
And guys, just a heads up again, the podcast is going to be available at iHeart.com, Apple Podcasts, Spotify Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Twitch TV feed will be coming soon. And then the recorded episode is going to be uploaded to YouTube, where you can see me and Retro sit down and have this chat that we just did for you guys to enjoy. And Retro, man, thanks again for joining me. I really appreciate it. Looking forward to any future episodes with you, man.
Yeah, thanks for having me, man. It's been a blast just sharing my stories, man. And it's funny because a couple of these stories, like, I haven't really shared with people, so it's good to just be able to talk about it with somebody,
And you know what? That's why I originally started this podcast. It's very easy to sit down and talk frame data, but that bores me. It's more, let's let's talk to the individual. And you've been there with, you've been there when you see me record it, and I think you've told me it's like, you know what, this is fun. I would rather talk about the people instead of, oh, could that light kick beat that high kick or whatever the heck it is? Because again, to me, that's boring.
Yeah, it's one thing to explore frame data. It's one thing to explore, a player's competitive history, but it's more fulfilling and it's more personal to get to know the individual behind the player as opposed to just focusing on the player as a monolith.
Definitely, man, definitely. And with that, guys, this has been another fun episode of the podcast. Please go over to the YouTube channel, KPBFGC. Follow the channel. Give us a follow at Twitter as well, Kick Punch Block. Give a follow to Retro. Give everybody a follow, part of the team. We do this for you guys, and I hope you had a good time. Retro, once again, thank you very much, guys, and have yourself a good evening. That was a lot of fun.
This has been a KPB Media Works production.